Hi, my name is Alyssa Vine-Hodge. Welcome to the Ladybug Project. I'm the author of The Sense About Madness, and Kara Adams is with us. She's the author of the Little Yogi series. She's located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and is the founder of the Ladybug Project, where we are raising awareness for child molestation and trying to create a community of mutual healing, encouraging those who have felt small and silent to spread their wings and fly. So last week, I shared my personal story and the process of arriving at forgiveness and how it's a continual process of trying to work through that. We're doing a 3-week series. The last week was week 1. Today, Kara will share her story about forgiveness, and next week we'll have a special guest. So, Kara, can you kind of tell us, in short, your personal story and then some of what you've had to work through regarding forgiveness?
Yes. Just a little recap because I have shared a couple of things in the past little series that we've been doing. And I was molested when I was 3 and under by a family relative. And as well as other people in my family were also molested. And I really didn't know about it, honestly. Throughout the years, my family moved when I was about 6 years old from Louisiana to South Carolina. And it was the thing that bothered me the most in my childhood was I've always been pretty vibrant, but I believe that I had a tendency to be a little bit on edge with things and just very hyper and sensitive to things, very sensitive and felt kind of emotional at times. And I will say that I had this reoccurring dream that was the only consistency I can remember. And I had this dream and it was so scary. I'd wake up screaming. I had that as a child until about I was in my 20s. So I was very angry at men when I was in high school, and I didn't date a lot because I was so angry with men. I was just like, men are stupid. I hate men. I just say the basic silly stuff, but I didn't understand why. So I didn't want to date. I didn't want to open myself up to anyone. I had Alyssa as a best friend, and she'll tell you I was kind of annoying at times. It was a little bit much. I was like, hey, what's up? Whoa! And so, but I put myself in counseling when I was 20 because I didn't understand. I still was having that dream. And the dream was I was in the bath. I'll tell you about this dream. It's really weird. I was in the bathroom and some monstrous guy came in and just like pushed open the door. And I am running out of the dream naked at a school and just screaming and begging for help. And so I would wake up to that. It was a lot more intense than that. You know, you say something, but it's a lot more intense when you're living through it. So every time I went to a counselor, because I went through several counselors, because when I lived in Denver, that's when I first went to a counselor. And she was the first person that said, Kara, did you experience someone when you were younger that hurt you sexually? And I was like, what? No, not a chance. And so I didn't understand that there is such thing as called childhood amnesia. And I'll be quite frank with you. I still don't remember a lot of things when I was 6 and under. My first memories are moving to South Carolina, and then I start having memories of, I remember my childhood only from 6 and up. And I was like, it was halfway through the year. So it's a very small portion of my 6-year-old that I remember. So that's basically what happened. And like I said, I was in counseling for a while, and then I decided to start, I met someone. It was my ex-husband, and I started, I dated him not even for 6 months. We got married. And we started having kids right away. And there were a lot of issues in our marriage. And I didn't understand our issues. So I tried to get us in counseling, and we went a couple of times, but I still remained in counseling. And it wasn't until after my divorce, about in 2010, and starting to branch out and date and different things, that I was like, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at relationships. What's going on here? So I was seeing a counselor, and once again, this counselor is like, Kara, whatever happened in your past is in your past, and it's okay. And you don't have to relive that. And so I went through a bunch of counseling sessions, and finally one day I was parked I wasn't parked, but I was stopped at a stoplight. I look over to the right, and there was a bank. And my predator was a banker, and I look over, and I instantly start having flashbacks of a penis, and of, I was very upset, and I started instantly crying, and I didn't understand how this was happening. I was like, is my mind making this up? And it was so fresh. It was so vivid. It was so to the point. I was like, this happened. And it felt like I was reliving the whole experience over again. So I went and communicated with my counselor after that. And so we walked through a process, and I thought I forgave this person. Well, turns out I really didn't. Or maybe I did at that second. After several I didn't just forgive them right away. I'm saying we walked through talking about the process, talking about what happened. And then he was telling me a story of this woman that had arthritis, and how your pain could go beyond internal. It can affect you physically. It's like a metaphysical, like your symptoms, if you're sick on the outside, like arthritis, it's deeper within what's going on. Like he was telling me about this lady that had arthritis, and she had a lot of unforgiveness, and once she forgave, she literally felt the arthritis leave her body. And so I was talking to him, and I was learning all these things, and I came to a point where, and he actually did hypnotherapy for counseling. I didn't ever go into that intense of a counseling session, but I do remember like being on the edge of it sometimes. And I felt like I was like, in that second, I was like, all right, I forgive this person. And then we are talking about forgiveness, right, Alyssa?
Yeah.
So I was in my 30s, and young 30s. About 34, 35. So it's only really 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And ever since then, it's been a daily or weekly, yearly process of learning forgiveness. When I went to counseling, I was like, okay, I'm forgiven. I can live my life. I love people. I love this, blah, blah. But then I would find myself in my closet. I had this really nice closet at the time. You could walk in, and there's lots of room, and I would be on my knees. I would be getting dressed to go to work, and I would just have this breakdown, and I would fall on my knees and just cry and feel like an intense amount of pain and be angry. It's like, why did you take this from me? Why did you pretty much F up my life? I blamed a lot. I blamed, thinking it was okay to blame because this person ruined the way I thought for the rest of my life. They took an innocence from me. They took something that was justified. It was okay for me to be so angry at this person that they had no right to do what they did. And I was so angry about it that I felt justified in my anger. And then I'd find myself on my knees in my closet and say, this is not the way to live your life. In anger, because I really found it reflected in everything in my life, the anger. And then
That's okay. I did want to ask you, and I did want to mention to our listeners who've had these experiences that the rage that you feel, the anger that you feel, it is justifiable. It's so justifiable to feel that anger. And part of holding on to it for me was wishing that other people would step up to the plate and feel that angry on my behalf. So I didn't want to let go of it because of that. And Kara, I'm gathering from your story that maybe it was similar. But how did you find that transition of realizing the anger was hurting you? And then do you believe it's possible to use anger in a healthy way, like almost that righteous anger the Bible talks about, where we can affect change in the community around us and in other people's lives?
That is so good. That's so good. I feel like some people have really mastered this. If anybody out there has ever heard of like Marianne Williamson or Gabrielle Bernstein or even Lewis Howes, some of these people, you go back and they've been through a lot, but there's a similar thing behind all of them, and they're driven. They've succeeded, or what in our perception in this world, like we see them as like, wow, look at the success they've become. And I think a key to that is, Marianne Williamson talks about it, is going to that place of pain and allowing yourself to walk through that pain. And then, I mean, honestly, I feel like there's nowhere else to go from that pain than to grow. So I think sabotaging ourselves by being trapped in the anger is something we have to recognize first. We have to understand, what is this anger doing to me? It's almost as if you have to remove yourself from yourself. And this is the key that I've done over the past year, is learning there are things we have to do. And for me, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but for me, I know meditating in the mornings, first thing in the mornings, when I do, my whole day is different. I feel, I take myself, the meditation reminds me, hey, remove yourself from this. If I can be really real with you guys, I'll be really intense for a second, but then also there's other situations, like let's take it as driving your car. Has anybody ever experienced road rage before? When you're in your car and somebody cuts you off, or somebody's not driving as fast as you want them to drive, you kind of like, you're like getting kind of irritated. You're like, what the hell is wrong with this person? But then it's like, in that second, this is what I do. I say, Kara, seriously, why are you so upset about this? Because you have to be somewhere. This person doesn't know that. This person's just in there, la, 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 living their daily life. And I have to take myself to a point where I go, okay, I'm going to remove myself from my body, or act like I am. I mean, I'm not literally leaving my body and wreck the car, but I'm saying, like, remove myself and go, why are you so upset? Why? And watch yourself. So act as if you're removing yourself, and then watch yourself. Why is Kara choosing to grab onto anger right in that second? And go with it. So instead, removing myself and looking at myself, analyzing myself, and saying, is this really worth it for me to get so upset? So you're bringing yourself to a place where you are in control of your reactions. If something happens, you look and go, how am I going to react to this? It's in that very split second where you can go, I can be like, get the hell out of here. Or I can be like, breathe. This is temporary. This isn't forever. Once I get through this light, I'm going to pass this person. I'm never going to see him again. So I have to do that, not only in situations like that, but I find I do that in, like with my children. I know, like one of my boys, his birthday's this weekend, and this is very fresh and very new to me. So I was telling Alyssa about it yesterday. I was like, yeah, he wants to have a birthday party, and he lives an hour away. And so, he wants to stay and hang out with his friends. I totally get that. I mean, maybe normal, I don't know what normal is, but maybe other people are like, oh yeah, just let him, that's fine. That's life, Kara. But as a mother, I've spent pretty much every birthday with my children, and this whole year is new to me. And not seeing my son, I can instantly go into an emotion. I can start crying and being upset because I love my kid so much. And we get in this routine of thinking acting out in this emotion is okay, and that anger is only going to sabotage my life and bring about an emotion where I can either stay in bed all day, or I can get up and go think about, why am I really upset that my son told me he wants to do something different? Why am I really upset? I'm trying to remove myself and not make it where I'm attached to that emotion. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not attaching myself to the emotion so I don't react in the emotion. Like, I'm removing myself to say, okay, I understand it, and let's be realistic here. Let's live in this moment here.
I think that's typical for people who've experienced such a massive trauma, such as child molestation. Like, the anger and the bigness of that situation gets translated into smaller situations in our lives that may not require as much emotion, but we can't help but sometimes react to them that way. Everything becomes that massive in our mind. So
True.
It's that learning how to adjust our thinking and our responses that takes time and practice.
It's kind of like, I like to put things with things like the ocean. It's kind of like the ocean. Like every time something happens, a wave crashes on the shore, but we have to remember it's just a wave and it's going to go back into the ocean. It's just for that minute. It's just for that second. But we have to remember to look back and see the bigger picture of like this ocean full of water. And I guess what I'm trying to say is when the waves come and we feel the intensity of the waves, we have to remember, allow that wave to smooth out and go back into the water. And that's our emotions. Like, I feel the intensity of this right now. What am I going to do? Am I going to like become a tsunami, or am I going to like chill out and go back into the ocean and be like, oh, okay, bigger picture here, bigger picture, bigger picture. I don't have to react.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the most intense, powerful tool that we have as human beings. Like, I have the power to say, you're not ruling my emotions. I'm in charge of that. I'm not giving that permission to my ex-husband or to my predator or to anybody. I'm not allowing those people to temporarily take my peace. Because you look out at the ocean and the sunrise or the sunset and you see how peaceful the water is out there. The only thing that's making the noise is the waves, right? And those can be the circumstances of life. Those can be the experiences of life. But how we perceive them, are we going to allow ourselves to look, hey, let me look at the horizon again. Let me look at the peace of the ocean. There's the peace. And then the waves just become this consistent sound that can be nurturing to our soul, that can be nurturing to our ears, and we can rest easy. And so anytime anything happens and like, woo, there's a wave. Woo, what am I going to do? I'm going to breathe and I'm going to let it become peaceful. Even in that intense situation, I'm going to let myself come at rest. And my reaction is going to be, what is it? Like the queen, right? Queen Elizabeth. No reaction. None of that. She's just like this the whole time. Right? We can do that with everything in our lives. Like, even when we're on the computer, like, and like something technically going wrong and you're like, oh, you don't understand what's going on, but you just got to be like, ocean. Oh, I get it. Ocean. This is just a wave. Go back, wave. Go back to the peace of the ocean. So is that flowy at all? I mean, does that make any sense? Or are you just like, that's a little bit out there, Kara?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, I don't know how much time we've
done
to
wrap it up.
Maybe in one of our other sessions, we can continue talking about like that concept of righteous anger, and not only learning to respond to situations differently in our lives, but using anger against injustice to transform the world, like we're trying to do in a small way through the Ladybug Project. So.
Exactly. So that's, I did want to say, like, I was saying the ocean, I guess, because to be able to take the injustice and respond in a healthy way is, if we remain at peace and if we find that ocean peace of every experience, of every life circumstance, that we're actually living the justice part. We're living the part of us that is justified, like, I can still have my peace. I can still be empowered. And when I said Queen Elizabeth, no response from her. You don't see a lot of emotions from her. Her biggest gestures are like nod the head. And you're like, what? Like, when Princess Diana died, she didn't cry or anything. She just like bowed her head a little bit, showing respect at the funeral. That was the only emotion you saw from her. She bowed her head. And for us to be able to want righteousness, to want that justice, for us to do it in a way where it's going to impact so many lives. Like through this project, me and Alyssa, it's such a small gesture, like Alyssa said, maybe, but like just like the Queen of Elizabeth that nodded her head at Princess Diana's funeral, even though it was a small, it impacted all of England. Like they noticed it, you know what I mean? And so our small gestures, our small waves of peace is going to bring about justice and going to bring about recognition. So I think that's where I was tying it to. And I'm sorry I didn't like wrap that up. So.
No, that's okay. You did just now. It makes sense. Thank you. Everything made a lot of sense. So I love it. And just for our listeners, don't get discouraged. I've felt that tsunami rise up in me before.
Mm-hmm.
Probably several times a year, I feel myself becoming a tsunami. So I'm learning how not to react in that way and just like detach, like Kara said, and become just the peaceful waves and learn to feel good in that restorative state. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Kara, for sharing your story and your process. So.
Well, we love you guys, and our mission is to impact one life at a time, one wave at a time, because we are all a part of this amazing ocean of life, and we want to be the change. We want to be the stillness that the world recognizes as, wow, this is a peaceful place, and we can live here together, right? And
right.
It starts with us though, and the more we allow ourselves to heal individually, the more the earth will be healed, and we will be the voice for those. We will be the soft spoken, very loud voice of like the ocean. It's there. The ocean covers most of the earth, and that's what we're doing, one life at a time, one wave at a time. So thank you for joining us in the Ladybug Project. And I just want to wrap up with saying, if you want to impact a life, The Sense About Madness Alyssa wrote, it's a phenomenal book. A raw look at child abuse, sexual violence, and mental illness. And then if you have children going through a trauma, I've created the Little Yogi series books. The first one's called Just My Luck. It's about Joy Ladybug. She learns to be still, to take a deep breath, breathe in, breathe out, and say everything's going to be okay. And I'm continuing the series with her. She's hidden in all the books. This is A New Dawn, and it just has the sun coming up on every continent. I've illustrated and written all the books, but helping children, have a tool to understand their thoughts and what's going on, and to be mindful of being present, like we all need to be. Everybody be blessed. Have an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.